And it is hour 3 of a Tuesday morning, the 22nd of July, 2025. Renewal by Anderson, bringing you the hour. Headline at BillMick.com with links to Dave Bowman and all his work, since he's bringing us the entirety of this hour. The Coin of the Realm is the headline. Click on that. You'll find links to Dave Bowman's podcast and other work. And if you want to follow us on Instagram, you can do it at WMMB Radio. Dave, it's our Liberty 250 series where we're marching toward the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country. And it's a long path we're taking, but it's interesting to get there. What do you have on tap today?
By the middle of the 18th century, that's the 1700s, for those of you that may not know that, Britain is at the height of its global power. It's the sun never sets on the British Empire kind of thing. There's a small little manuscript that begins making waves in political circles in London. It's not a proclamation. It's not an act of parliament. It wasn't even published publicly at first. Later it would be. It's a private meditation penned by a man by the name of Henry St. John, who is Viscount Bolingbroke. Don't ask me to go through all the English titles and stuff. It's boring and it's excessive, but there you go. But Henry St. John in 1738 writes this political theory that bores a lofty, almost romantic title: the idea of a patriot king. Now, what he offers is no ordinary theory of what a king should be. In his mind, it's the cure for everything that's making Britain sick: political corruption, political factions, petty squabbles. The patriot king, he argues, will be a monarch who is above all of that, a ruler who doesn't stand with the Whigs or the Tories, not with the merchants, the profiteers, but with the people themselves. He's disinterested. This king would be disinterested in personal gain, disinclined to feed factional fires, devoted entirely to the moral, constitutional good of the nation, and would reign as the people's king, not as Parliament's pawn. Now, when we fast forward to where we are in 1775, after the battles at Lexington and Concord, that idea, although it's nearly 4 decades old at this point, is still flickering in the minds of men in Philadelphia. The Second Continental Congress has gathered on May 10th, but not every man there is ready to declare independence. John Dickinson is a very cautious Pennsylvanian. He's a lawyer. He has a patriot's heart, but he still believes in the possibility of reconciliation. And the gamble with this reconciliation is that the real problem, and this is what I've told you before, isn't the king. King George really isn't the problem. The problem is ministers in Parliament who have misled him. And so this idea of the patriot king appeals to Dickinson and others, and they are going to appeal to King George III to be a patriot king. The problem, of course, is that King George III already thinks of himself as a patriot king. It's one of my favorite maxims is 2 people can read exactly the same words on a page and come to polar opposite conclusions as to what it means. To Dickinson, it means that the king will solve this problem. To King George, it will mean, I can't.
And we pick it up in 60 seconds here on WMMB. So, Dave, if what I'm picking up from what you're saying is we have a king here who feels there are constraints on him that he cannot do anything about this?
Well, in a way. Within the concept of the patriot king, he already sees himself as a patriot king. The question is, does what George III see, is it the same thing as what John Dickinson sees? This whole idea of a patriot king requires that the patriot king be above politics. He be above the factions. This idea he's a ruler who rules for the people, not for party or a specific cabal. It's not unlike an argument that we make about the president. The president should be above these things. He shouldn't be part of them. But that's not reality. Bolingbroke's strongest argument is that political parties are destructive. Now, where have we heard that before? Oh, yeah, George Washington said basically the same thing. The politics are going to divide the nation. They're going to weaken the monarchy in this case. They're going to foster corruption. Political parties are notorious for fostering corruption. It's an idea that is a very broad monarchist Republican philosophy. And he believes that the monarchy can serve liberty if the king can govern disinterestedly and morally. Now, this idea, of course, is very attractive in the idea of the Enlightenment philosophy, the readings that people like Dickinson have done. And we need to understand that in the wake of Lexington and Concord, the Congress begins to meet on May the 10th, 1775. They don't really know exactly what to do. 12 of the 13 colonies have showed up. Georgia has not. And they are debating this. There are some in Congress, particularly in the Northeast, John Adams, who are absolutely adamant. It is time to declare independence. We are independent. And there are an almost equal number in this Congress who aren't sure, or who are wishing for reconciliation. And indeed, even the Adamses of Congress continue to use language that sounds like, well, we love our king. We're happy with this king. It's Parliament that's the problem. If the king would just overrule Parliament, things would be great and we could be back to normal. And so the debate in Congress becomes kind of stifled. What do we do? Well, we need to do something. And so they're going to take a few actions along the way. But Dickinson is going to really push for this idea of reconciliation. And he hits upon the idea of appealing directly to King George III. Let's bypass Parliament. We're already pretty much ignoring Parliament anyway. Let's just ignore them and send a petition directly to the king. Now, one of the realities of the monarchy at that point in England was that the king would annually, or at least biannually, receive petitions. He would sit on the throne at St. James, and people would come and give him petitions, and he would read them. Normally, he has already read them, and so he already has a response, in place. And it's a really funky formality thing. And in fact, in many cases, Bill, some of these petitions are whispered to him by women at the court so that they don't have to be publicly aired. So he can pretend to hear them almost like gossip. It's a weird thing to watch happen, or I didn't watch it, obviously, but to read about. So the king sits on his throne. He hears these petitions, but he's had some problems with these. A few years ago, John Wilkes, the great libertarian leader in London, who is now, by the way, mayor of London, his petition really pissed the king off. And so he's refusing to hear petitions publicly right now. The idea is we're going to send this petition to him. He will read it. And the petition is going to be very flowery. And it's going to say, oh, we love the king. We need the king to help us. We need the king to get rid of your ministers and get rid of, overrule Parliament because they're misleading you. All of these ideas that Bolingbroke poured into this idea of a patriot king. The problem is, of course, that George III probably never read Bolingbroke. There's no direct evidence that he ever did. But he himself already has an idea that he is the patriot king. He believes very firmly that he is on the throne by the divine right of kings, that God himself chose George III to sit on the throne. And therefore, he already is in charge of things. But under the English system of government, and this is very important to understand, these people have already fought a civil war, executed one king, fought another civil war, got rid of another king, and brought in people, from Hanover to be king because they don't see it this way. They see it as the king is not the king. He's not unlimited. He's not, overwhelming. He is, in fact, literally the king of Parliament, not the king necessarily of the nation. Now, they don't use that in language, but in functionality, Parliament is supreme. And the king is supposed to work with Parliament, guiding Parliament, helping Parliament, and supporting Parliament as they rule the nation. And that is George III's definition of a patriot king, keeping to the constitution of the nation. Dickinson has high hopes, but George has even higher thoughts about what he is supposed to be.
And we pick it up when we continue on Bill Mick Live on a Tuesday morning with Dave Does History right here on WMMB.
This is Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live.
Renewal by Anderson bringing you this hour of the show as we're taking a look at the lead up to the independence of the country. Liberty 250 is what we call it. And we're talking about pleading to a patriot king to save the colonies from what they're enduring from Parliament. And Dave, he's just not quite there, huh?
Oh, and it's kind of an interesting thing because you've got this divided Congress that some of them, they still see an opportunity here to appeal directly to the king. Now, it's intriguing because from a political standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint, they should know better. But there's this hope that, and we have the same thing politically. We talk all the time about what we think should be happening, but it doesn't always match the political realities of what's going on. Some people see that as a negative.
Some of that's because we don't recognize how it all works. These folks had an idea of how everything worked.
They knew how it worked. And I think so do we, but, we have these high, lofty dreams. On May the 10th, 1775, the Second Continental Congress gets underway. As I said, 12 of the 13 states send delegates. Georgia does not, because Georgia is, it's Georgia. And much like they will do in 1788 and 1789, they're hoping for a better deal. They're having problems with the Indians, and they're hoping that the Crown will send troops to help them fight that war. And they figure, well, if we rebel, they won't do that. So maybe we should just kind of stay neutral for the time being. The other 12 states meet on May the 10th, which is a seminal day because as Congress gathers in Philadelphia, Benedict Arnold is leading the troops up at Fort Ticonderoga, along with Ethan Allen and others, and they are capturing Fort Ticonderoga, which matters because Fort Ticonderoga is full of cannons, which they will then drag all the way to Boston and use to encircle Boston and make the siege at Boston even more deadly for the British. Those cannons are coming from. So as that's happening, Congress is gathering. There is this kind of awkward interval. What do we do? John Dickinson is he's no lightweight. He's an important person. So when he says we should be trying to reconcile, John Adams is saying, we gotta get ready. We gotta declare independence. We gotta go to war. We gotta do this. There's this mix in Congress of, well, what do we do? What do we do? It's not unlike Congress today, diddling back and forth. What do we do? They decide to go ahead and say, well, in the meantime, we need to get at least ready. One of the things they do is they put together a committee on military affairs. They put George Washington in charge of that committee. That committee recommends that we need a Continental Army, and of course, that Continental Army needs a commander. Guess who we pick? George Washington. There's all kinds of stories about that. We don't have time to get on all that. On June the 15th, they assign George Washington to be the commander of all their troops, and they send him on his way to Boston to take command. In the meantime, before he can get there, of course, we have the famous Battle of Bunker Hill, which it's on Breed's Hill, but history is what it is. And Bunker Hill
doesn't sound as good as Bunker. Yeah,
it really doesn't. Bunker Hill, of course, is one of those moments in our history. We're not going to talk a lot about the battles, but it is one of the most intensive battles in our country. In fact, in the American Revolutionary War, it is the deadliest day of the American Revolutionary War. We will lose Dr. Joseph Warren in this battle. We will.
Dave, I believe you're back with us. Go right ahead, sir.
That's weird. Anyway, not sure where we froze, but we lose Dr. Warren. The Battle of Bunker Hill is a British victory, but it's what was known as a Pyrrhic victory. And it's this Battle of Bunker Hill that's really going to drive things in London in a few weeks when they learn about it. Remember, this is 1775, so there's no instant communication. It's going to be a minimum of 6 weeks before the king and London find out about it. But it is a very intense battle. And the only reason we lose this battle, we being the Americans, is because we run out of ammunition, which of course is going to be one of the biggest problems that plagues us during this whole thing. This battle causes Dickinson to double down. He wants to really, he knows the word of this battle is going to get the current king. And so he's very quick. And on July 5th, he drafts what is known as the Olive Branch Petition. We're going to extend an olive branch to the king, and we're really going to appeal to this Patriot King in this Olive Branch Petition. This Olive Branch Petition is full of flowery language about how much we, the colonials, love King George. We adore King George. We want to be King George's subjects because King George was chosen by God to rule us, and we're good Englishmen. And it's full of this idea. And then it gets to the heart of the matter, Bill. It says, we want the king to dismiss all your ministers that are advising you to attack us. And we want you to ignore Parliament and their laws restricting us, the coercive acts and the intolerable acts and those kinds of things. Please, Mr. King, please be a Patriot King and rule over us like Bolingbroke would have called for as a Patriot King. This is approved on July 5th, which is, of course, two and a half weeks after the Battle of Bunker Hill. So the idea here is if we can put this on a ship, maybe this will get there. You don't want it to get there before the news of Bunker Hill, because then it looks like we're appealing and then fighting a battle. But maybe it looks like we were attacked, and so we were just defending ourselves. You kind of want them to get there roughly the same time. Of course, they don't. The news of Bunker Hill gets to the king first. He receives that word on August 10th, thereabouts. It appears in the London papers right around August 12th. And it's shortly thereafter that the Olive Branch Petition arrives. And the idea here is, please, Mr. King, we want your magnanimity. We're going to be loyal to you. We want peace. Our breasts retain too tender a regard for you to have further bloodshed. Please fire your ministers. Override Parliament. The problem there is that the king himself, as a patriot, knows that he can't do this, because if he does do that, he's going to find himself back in Germany and being replaced on the throne by a parliament that's already cut one king's head off for doing that and fired another one.
Not a good spot to be in, it would seem.
No. Plus, he still believes that God told him to do this, and he's not putting up with any more of that.
We'll see how it wraps up when we continue. We'll also take your calls as we consider Liberty 250 today on Bill Mick Live.
Call Bill now, 321-768-1240.
Yeah, we let you get in with Dave on this Dave Does History as we look at the Patriot King when you call us. And don't forget, podcast will be available for you shortly after the show, both for this show and the Florida Roundtable, right there at the top of the page at BillMick.com, our sponsor, Renewal by Anderson. So I guess the colonies are sending a mixed message here, Dave, which is we want to fight, don't hurt us. Oh, there you are. I didn't have you on. Now you're on.
It's a totally mixed message. It's, on the one hand, King George III, we love you, we adore you, we want to be your subjects. We just don't like those Parliament people, and we don't like those ministers that you have appointed that we think are misguiding you. And on the other hand, if you send your troops after us again, we're going to send another 250 of them home in body bags, and we're going to take over Quebec and Montreal, and we're going to mess up your empire here pretty soon. There are people in Parliament who, by the way, fully support what the Americans are doing. They see King George, the Whig party there sees King George as very tyrannical as well. They accuse him of being just like Charles I, the Stuart Charles II, Stuart tyranny. This idea that the king is going to override Parliament, which is impossible. George III can't do that. He can't even imagine that, because the idea here in England, and what we should have understood, was that the king is actually the king of Parliament. Yes, he's the monarch and the king of Great Britain, Ireland, all that stuff. But reality is he is just really the leader of Parliament. And he works with, for, and about Parliament. He is, in George's own words here, he is simply defending Parliament's rights in the colonies. And so he actually writes a letter at this point that says, we should have zero opposition in the next Parliament because I'm just defending your rights to maintain your authority over the colonies. The problem he has is if he accepts this petition, he acknowledges the legitimacy of the Second Continental Congress. And he can't do that, because if he does, then now all of a sudden he's got a Congress and he's got a Parliament. Well, who's in charge? In his view, Parliament is. If I accept this petition, I'm saying that they're equal to Parliament, at least in America, and in his view, they're not. And so he will not receive the petition. He will never read it officially. He probably has it read to him in private. The fact is that they call for him to fire his ministers and to ignore Parliament, which is unthinkable. Again, even the people who support America in Parliament, if he had done that, probably would have accused him of being, a Stuart tyrannist, and they would have either cut his head off or sent him back to Hanover. On August the 23rd, 1775, King George III will issue a proclamation of rebellion. He will declare the American colonies in rebellion. He goes beyond this. He literally has the same problem that Abraham Lincoln is going to have in 1861. It's a rebellion, but he sort of treats it like a foreign war. And so there's a call to send the Navy to embargo the American coastline, to put us all, to close down our ports and stuff like that, and things that you would do against a foreign nation, but not necessarily an internal rebellion. But he specifically says we have to treat this like it's a foreign war. He is resistive, however, of calling up troops. He thinks he has enough troops already to handle this, although he does hire the Hessians, what we're going to generally call the Hessians, German troops that are professional. He immediately begins to lease those. The idea being that they will come over and take over the British posts in the Mediterranean, freeing up British troops to go do that. But remember, he's the king of Hanover, so who gets paid for those troops? The king of Hanover. Well, that's George III. So he's making money on the deal, even though he claims he's not.
More like a modern politician than we might have thought.
A little bit, yeah. John Adams, when they learn of this declaration, proclamation of rebellion, John Adams is thrilled. He says, well, then, regardless of anything else, We're already independent. They're already treating us as a foreign nation. He's declared our independence for us. We don't need to do it now. He's treating us as a foreign enemy. Everything is great. John Dickinson, of course, is badly shaken. He really had high hopes that the Patriot King would step up and put an end to all of this. But it's clear now from the king's actions, what the king has said, what the king has done, that there is no peaceful resolution to this that's in any way, shape, or form possible. The only thing that's going to settle this, King George III himself will say this, is it's going to come to blows. It already has. But now it's definitive. Now it is, in fact, a war between the 13 American colonies and the King of England. It's at this point that the Americans realized that the Patriot King was a ghost. It was Bolingbroke's ideas were great, but they're not valid. The Olive Branch Petition had been written in the shadow of muskets, blood. It wasn't a demand, but it was a prayer, a final appeal to a king who, in the colonialist minds, still might rise up to be the man that Bolingbroke had envisioned, a patriot king, a healer, a moral compass. But that was never going to happen. George III couldn't rise above politics because he was a politician. He digs in. He doesn't answer the petition with words. He answers it with regiments, mercenaries, and declaration of rebellion. And in doing so, he breaks the final thread that ties the colonies to a monarchy as a source of justice. Bolingbroke had dreamed of a king who would save the nation from itself. And in many ways, this rebellion, this war, is going to hurt England far more than just losing the colony. What the colonialists will discover, the Americans will discover, and by the way, this is the era when that term becomes the general usage for us, Americans. King George III refers to us as Americans. Not Canadians, not Caribbean. We are the Americans. The colonialists discover, to their sorrow and then to their resolve, and Dickinson himself will become one of the leading patriots, is that they're going to have to save themselves. The Patriot King was an idea, but America would choose liberty.
And we pick it up in 60 seconds. You want in, now's the time. 321-768-1240. Dave, as we look at this, I didn't realize how the moniker Americans got bestowed upon us. So basically, Adams was right. We don't have to declare this. They've already said it for us. Here we are. Let's go.
You know, I think of all the people in history that I might like to go back and meet, if I could, if time travel was a thing, I think John Adams would be at the top of that list. He certainly seems to be one of the most sharp minds out there. Yeah, he's ecstatic. When they get the word of the Proclamation of Rebellion, he's just thrilled. Well, it's done. We're an independent nation now. Now, the others don't see it necessarily that way, but it does shift the focal point. It does change the mind of Americans from, we're upset with Parliament, we're arguing with Parliament, we should be able to govern ourselves, not Parliament. It changes the whole thing. Now the focal point is George III. He is the tyrant. He is the guy who, arguably, and there are many English historians who make this, why would you call him a tyrant? He didn't do anything tyrannical. In fact, he avoided doing the things that would have been considered Stuart tyrannies. But to us, because he would not help us, because he would not be that patriot king that we wanted, he becomes the focal point of all of our vitriol. He becomes...
Did the English perceive him as having failed in this war getting started then? Or
no.
Was he the guy who did what he should have done?
No, most of England sees this as necessary. They see this as, again, Parliament is supreme. Parliament has the right to rule. And the Americans are telling us, no, who do they think they are? What's next? Canada? or India or whoever? What if the East India Tea Company decides that they're in charge? It's the problem is that this is going to set some dangerous precedents. And in the British mind, the English mind, the king has handled this exactly as he's required to according to their constitution. Could he have gone outside of that? He could have. But again, we're talking about a nation that has already deposed 2 kings, cutting one of their heads off, and explained to these kings that you're here because we chose you, not the other way around. You might believe in this divine rule of kings where God himself chose you, but we see it differently. We chose you, not God. So Parliament really sees itself as supreme. And even George III says, I'm fighting for Parliament's rights, not mine. So Parliament should stop fighting me on stuff. There shouldn't be any of this Whig opposition because, but for us, the Americans, George III is now the focal point. He is now the hated symbol of British tyranny. And we are going to make our complaints very loudly and very well known.
So we're already compiling our list of grievances. We're getting ready to put this all together.
We're going to start putting it together, the Second Continental Congress. Now that they've been told they're in rebellion, they got nothing better to do than make sure that we dot all the T's or cross all the T's and dot all the I's.
Nice to know where you stand. Where are we looking next week, Dave?
Well, next week we're going to go through that winter of discontent when the Sunshine Patriots show up. But the time is now. Thomas Paine is going to lead us down that idea of common sense.
Very good. And we will look at it then. Thank you, Dave Bowman. Appreciate that. Enjoyed having you all day. Renewal by Anderson made our hour possible. Wide open Wednesday tomorrow.